Have you ever found yourself just sitting on your own couch at the end of a really long day, and you pick up your phone, open an app, close it like a second later, open another one, and then just lock the screen?
Oh, yeah. Like all without actually knowing what you were even looking for.
Exactly. Or, maybe you've experienced something even more unsettling, like sitting in a genuinely incredible restaurant or gripping the steering wheel of the exact car you spent years dreaming about. And instead of feeling this overwhelming rush of joy, you just feel this strange, unnamed void inside.
Yeah, that empty feeling.
Right. You're moving incredibly fast, checking off all the boxes, but you have absolutely no idea where you are actually going.
That specific feeling is, well, it's a remarkably universal experience, yet it's one that our modern culture really conditions us to feel deeply ashamed of.
Oh, absolutely.
Because the immediate internal monologue is usually quite brutal. I mean, we tell ourselves that we have everything we're supposed to have, so feeling nothing must mean there's something fundamentally broken within us.
And that paradox is exactly what we're unpacking today. We're doing a deep dive into some really fascinating material that attempts to decode this very feeling.
It's such a striking combination of sources, honestly, because on one hand, we are looking at the raw, deeply emotional human experience of feeling lost.
Right.
But on the other hand, we are examining this almost structural, architectural blueprint of how the human mind completely breaks down its old operating system and rebuilds itself into something much more resilient.
Yeah, and so our mission today is to figure out this incredibly counterintuitive phenomenon, like why hitting rock bottom or experiencing sudden devastating losses or, feeling completely empty despite having everything is actually the exact required blueprint for profound personal growth.
Which is a heavy concept to wrap your head around.
It really is. So, okay, let's unpack this. Let's start at the very beginning of the timeline. Why do we feel this strange emptiness in the first place, long before any sort of awakening even registers on our radar?
Well, we have to start by diagnosing the modern condition, which the sources summarize just beautifully as having everything, feeling nothing.
Having everything, feeling nothing.
Wow. Right. Picture the highly successful person. They maintain the perfect smile, their resume is flawless, and they have successfully accumulated all the markers of societal achievement.
The house, the job, the car.
Exactly. But underneath that polished surface, there is this profound, creeping terror.
A terror that the grand promise of society was just, well, a lie. Because you follow the formula, go to school, get the job, buy the house, and the formula stops working for you. That is an existential crisis.
Completely.
You did everything right. But if your outside world is bursting at the seams and your internal world is completely barren, that discrepancy just has to be maddening.
It is entirely maddening. And the visual design document maps out exactly why this happens with this brilliant graphic. It's called the speed of life chart.
Oh, I love this part.
Yeah, so the y-axis represents the speed and volume of our external lives. How many calendar invites we have, how much media we consume, the sheer volume of things we acquire.
Right, the external noise.
Exactly. And then the x-axis represents our ability to hear our own inner voice. And the relationship is violently inverse.
Meaning as one goes up, the other goes down.
Precisely. As the speed of life accelerates upward, the clarity of the inner voice completely flatlines. We are essentially building larger, louder lives, specifically to avoid the terrifying prospect of sitting in an empty room with our own thoughts.
So we're basically running on a psychological treadmill that just keeps speeding up. And if we step off, we just fall face first into that silence.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
So like making the house bigger, chasing the newest phone, hoarding hundreds of superficial connections, none of that is actually about desire. It's a defense mechanism against the quiet.
That is the core mechanism at play, yeah. The ego uses external noise to drown out internal dissatisfaction. But a human soul, or, simply our psychological endurance, cannot sprint on that treadmill forever.
It just burns out.
Right. The text points out that when the deafening noise of ambition becomes unsustainable, the internal dryness reaches a critical mass. And because we almost never have the courage to slow down voluntarily, life eventually has to intervene and pull the plug for us.
See, I want to push back on that idea just a little bit, or at least play devil's advocate for a moment.
Sure, go for it.
Society constantly bombards us with the message to keep pushing. We idolize the grind. So the idea of voluntarily stopping feels less like courage and more like giving up. If we stop running, We are forced to look at that unnamed void we talked about at the beginning.
And you're touching on exactly why the next phase of this architecture is so jarring. The ego will fight tooth and nail to keep running because stopping equates to a kind of psychological death.
Right, the ego hates losing control.
Exactly. The illusion of control is the ego's absolute favorite drug. So because we absolutely refuse to slow down, the intervention that life provides is rarely a gentle tap on the shoulder. It's usually a collision.
Which brings us to the concept of the fracture. If we won't pause the treadmill, the universe just unclogs the machine while we are sprinting. And that brings an immense amount of pain.
It does. And the document refers to this as the protective intervention.
Protective.
Yeah, protective. We inherently view a painful roadblock, like losing a career you built your identity around, a sudden massive failure, or a relationship abruptly ending. We view that as a cruel punishment.
Right, we assume destiny is just angry with us,
Yeah.
that we've somehow failed the test of life.
Exactly. But the architecture of an awakening completely flips this narrative. The document illustrates a path called the current trajectory, which is rocketing straight toward the desired ego path.
And the ego path is incredibly seductive. I mean, it's the path of getting the promotion, securing the wealth, achieving the fame.
But looking at the blueprint from the sources, that path doesn't lead to a summit. It leads directly off a cliff.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. If you stay on it, the ultimate destination is burning out, losing your family, or completely losing your soul.
And that is where the massive, immovable block drops into your life. It violently forces you off that desirable ego path and drops you straight into what the chart labels the zone of pain.
Yes, but here is the critical pivot. The zone of pain is actually the reality path. It isn't a punishment, it's a high-stakes rescue mission.
A rescue mission.
Right. It is the only mechanism strong enough to force a person to learn humility, to let go of their fabricated image, and to start building a foundation on something real.
Framing a devastating loss as a high-stakes rescue mission really changes everything. I mean, we're so conditioned to interpret a roadblock as the universe punishing us rather than saving us.
Exactly.
The sources use two incredibly visceral analogies to ground this idea. The first one basically dismantles the whole love and light myth of spiritual growth. It compares the human ego to a seed.
I love this analogy.
It's so good. There's this romanticized idea that awakening begins with joy, like walking into a sunlit meadow. But the text argues that a seed left on a sunny, comfortable marble countertop will never, ever sprout. The sun just bakes it dry.
And the comfort of constant success serves the exact same function. It bakes the ego, making it hard and impenetrable. Success rarely demands self-reflection, it only demands more success.
Exactly. But for the seed to actually transform, it requires the suffocating darkness and the immense crushing pressure of the soil. That pressure is the only thing that can physically fracture the hard outer shell so the life inside can finally escape.
So true.
The joy doesn't come first. The crack comes first.
That metaphor illustrates the mechanical necessity of pain perfectly. And the second analogy from the text takes that mechanical necessity and gives it this heavy emotional weight. It compares the sudden, painful life intervention to a mother aggressively yanking her child back by the arm.
Oh yeah, like the child is stepping off a curb, totally unaware of a speeding car barreling toward them. And the mother grips their arm so hard it actually leaves a bruise, yanking them backward onto the pavement. And from the child's perspective in that exact second, the mother is the villain.
Because the grip hurts.
Yeah, the grip hurts. The child cries, feeling betrayed by the sudden violence of the action, completely oblivious to the fact that they're just spared from a fatal impact.
If we expand on that, we really have to ask ourselves, how many of our own past failures, the ones we cried over and felt deeply betrayed by, were actually just that mother's grip?
Wow, that's a profound thought.
Right. We might spend a decade mourning a lost job or a closed door, only to realize in hindsight that if we had actually gotten what we wanted, the chronic stress would have destroyed our health or dismantled our marriage.
Right.
The failure forces the humility that success prevents. Pain demands that we audit our lives.
But recognizing that mother's grip is only half the picture. Because sometimes the intervention is a dramatic, life-altering crisis, but other times the universe doesn't throw a boulder in your path.
Yeah.
It just taps very quietly on the exact door you have spent years avoiding.
Exactly.
And as the shell cracks, the way life communicates with you shifts.
Yeah, we transition from the massive fractures to what we could call the anatomy of a nudge. This is the phase where the massive external drama slows down and the internal shift finally begins to take center stage.
These incredibly specific, quiet, mundane triggers. You aren't having a dramatic vision on a mountaintop.
Right, no lightning bolts.
No lightning bolts.
Yeah.
Instead, you're walking through your house, you notice your father's worn-out shoes sitting by the door, and suddenly your chest just caves in with this immense ache of empathy.
Yeah.
Or you come home late from chasing some superficial goal, you see your mother asleep in a chair waiting up for you, and the sheer weight of how much you've taken her for granted brings you to your knees.
Those moments, they bypass the intellect entirely. They speak directly to the newly exposed core. And the sources share a particularly striking story about a businessman to illustrate this.
Oh, the guy in the rain.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
He is standing under an awning during a downpour. His business is collapsing, his family life is a wreck, and he is completely consumed by his own despair and wounded pride.
Right, he is totally trapped in his ego.
Exactly. And then an old woman walks by. She's selling lottery tickets. She is completely drenched in the rain. She possesses essentially zero material wealth. And yet she looks at him, smiles with genuine warmth, and says, as long as you're alive, you can rebuild.
And that single passing comment completely shatters his perspective.
It does. And why? Because the ego relies on the hierarchy of wealth and success to feel superior. When someone at the absolute bottom of society's hierarchy demonstrates a level of peace and resilience that the wealthy businessman entirely lacks, the illusion just breaks.
He realizes he's living more miserably in his mansion of worries than a woman standing in the rain.
Exactly. Those external messengers are powerful.
But the sources emphasize that true awakening is defined by the physical, internal shifts that follow. And this part fascinated me because it defies all the pop culture stereotypes of what enlightenment looks like.
Oh, totally.
It isn't sudden levitation or glowing aura. The checklist for an awakened mind notes that it actually feels like a sudden, heavy physical exhaustion from superficial conversations.
And this is a critical juncture where many people become very confused. When that exhaustion hits, they often misdiagnose themselves.
How so?
Well, they look at their sudden distaste for networking events or loud parties and think, am I losing my drive? Is this depression?
Oh, that makes total sense. It's like turning off a massive humming refrigerator in your kitchen that you didn't even realize was running.
Yes.
Suddenly the silence is deafening and you aren't sure what to do with it. You worry you've lost your edge because you suddenly prefer sitting alone in a quiet cafe over dominating a room full of important people.
But the text is very clear on this. This isn't depression, and it isn't antisocial behavior. It is simply your nervous system finally regulating itself.
Regulating itself.
Yeah. The internal noise has settled down enough that your own inner voice can actually be heard. The desperate, exhausting need to constantly prove your worth to strangers simply evaporates.
Which naturally leads to a radical shift in how you navigate the world. If you no longer need to prove yourself, your entire defense system becomes obsolete.
Right.
The visual document dedicates a slide to this, titled, The Terrifying Vulnerability of a Softened Heart. And I want to offer an analogy here.
Go for it.
Society trains us from a very young age to build this spiky armor. We are taught to be cold, to be suspicious, to react violently and quickly to any perceived slight. We wear this armor like a heavy spacesuit.
A spacesuit, yeah.
Sure, it protects us from the vacuum of space, it stops people from hurting us, but also means we can't feel the sun on our skin or the breeze. We survive, but we stop experiencing actual life.
That is a phenomenal way to visualize it. We look at that spacesuit, that spiky armor, and we proudly label it strength. But the design philosophy document counters that assumption brilliantly.
What does it say?
It states that this illusion of strength is actually just an unheld heart. It is a rigid, defensive posture born entirely from a paralyzing fear of being vulnerable.
We are so terrified of getting hurt, we make sure our spikes hurt anyone who comes close first.
Precisely. It's the opposite of true resilience. A cold, heavily armored heart is incapable of receiving direction or experiencing genuine connection. True psychological and spiritual growth only begins the moment that internal rigidness begins to melt.
And that transition has got to be terrifying.
It's the most terrifying step of the entire process, the transition from the armor to the thaw.
Because the second you take the spacesuit off, you are exposed.
Yeah.
You're feeling everything at maximum volume.
Yes. The numbness wears off. You find yourself tearing up at incredibly small, genuine kindnesses from a stranger. You notice a street sweeper working tirelessly in the hot sun, and you feel a deep physical empathy instead of just looking right through them.
Wow.
You suddenly feel the heavy, undeniable weight of an apology you owe someone. An apology your ego previously convinced you wasn't necessary. Softening your heart is infinitely harder and requires vastly more courage than acting tough.
Softening your heart is infinitely harder than acting tough.
Yeah.
Man, that is a quote to write down. And as you soften, as you take off that heavy suit, you naturally start to shed dead weight.
Yes, the changing floors concept.
Exactly. The sources refer to this phenomenon as changing floors. You find yourself naturally drifting away from transactional friendships. You physically cannot tolerate being in gossip-heavy, hyper-competitive rooms anymore.
It just becomes physically draining.
Right. And the most comforting part of this text is how it frames this exit. You don't need to make some dramatic declaration. You don't need to have a massive blowout argument to cut these people out of your life. The text explains that your vibrations simply no longer match.
It is a transition from friction to flow. You simply stop feeding the loops of drama. When you stop returning the serve in a game of gossip or one-upmanship, the game just naturally ends.
It's like realizing you've outgrown a pair of shoes. You aren't angry at the shoes, you just can't wear them anymore.
Perfect analogy.
The text explicitly reassures the listener during this lonely phase. You aren't lonely. Your mind is just changing floors. You are actively trading the frantic, desperate desire to be noticed by everyone for the quiet, profound desire to be deeply understood by a very small few.
And to solidify that transition from friction to flow, the sources provide a brilliant matrix comparing the unawakened soul to the awakened soul, specifically looking at the relationship between pain and observation.
Okay, lay that out for me.
Because experiencing pain in and of itself is not a guarantee of growth.
Right, just suffering through a bad event doesn't magically make you wise.
Exactly. Without observation, pain just makes you bitter. So let's look at the mechanics of the unawakened soul. When they experience a loss or an insult, their immediate reflex is outward.
They look for someone to blame.
Right. They blame destiny. They hold on to grudges like currency. They demand that the world apologize to them. If someone insults them, their reaction is an immediate, aggressive counterattack to protect their ego.
Which has to be exhausting.
It is. Maintaining that constant state of hypervigilance and friction requires a massive amount of daily energy.
It's draining just thinking about living like that, waking up every day feeling like you have to defend your image, win every argument, and prove you're right.
Conversely, the awakened soul takes an entirely different approach. When faced with pain or an insult, they become quieter. Their reflex is inward.
Inward instead of outward.
Yes. They search the painful event for a lesson rather than a culprit. They arrive at the realization that their internal peace of mind is simply too expensive to trade for the fleeting satisfaction of winning a petty argument.
Which brings us to the ultimate question, right? How do we actually apply this today? We all have to live in a busy, triggering world.
We do.
It's easy to say, I'm going to choose peace when you're meditating alone in a room. It's an entirely different challenge when your coworker undermines you in a meeting or someone cuts you off aggressively in traffic.
And that is where the sources deliver what might be the most vital practical tool in this entire blueprint. It's called the architecture of a single life-saving pause.
The sacred delay.
The sacred delay. It is a microscopic window of time between point A, which is the trigger, the insult, the failure, and point B, which is your response.
And all of our societal training tells us that power is defined by how fast and how hard you can strike back. If someone hits you with a verbal insult, the strong thing to do is to verbally destroy them in return, immediately.
But the architecture of an awakening redefines power completely. True power is not your ability to strike back. It is your capacity to absorb the blow and withhold the strike entirely.
Withhold the strike entirely.
Right. The sacred delay is that critical micro moment where you consciously override the primitive reflex to destroy, to prove yourself, or to retaliate. You step back. You take a breath. You stay silent.
You preserve your own peace.
Yes. Withholding one single harsh word in that micro moment can save a friendship, preserve a marriage, or spare you from a lifetime of karmic regret.
It is the ultimate shift from living in constant friction to living in quiet flow. It's the conscious choice to let the other person be right, simply because you don't want to carry the heavy energy of a fight.
Exactly.
And adopting that sacred delay completely changes how you measure a successful life. We finally leave behind the old ego metrics, how much money's in the bank, what title is on the door, how many people are looking at me, and we step into what the text calls the new metrics of a wealthy life.
And those new metrics are entirely internal. They cannot be measured by anyone looking at you from the outside.
So if the old metrics were external validation, these new ones are so simple, yet so profoundly difficult to achieve. The text defines wealth as a peaceful night of sleep, free from a racing, guilty mind.
A rare thing these days.
Seriously, wealth is sitting down to a simple meal with your family, and instead of glancing at your phone every 2 minutes, you're actually looking directly into their eyes. And perhaps the most powerful metric of all, wealth is making it to the very end of the day without having caused any unnecessary harm to another human being.
Achieving those metrics requires a life of near zero friction. And the text makes a really profound observation here. The deepest, most bone-aching exhaustion we experience as humans rarely comes from our physical labor or our busy schedules.
Where does it come from then?
It comes from the chronic strain of living contrary to our own soul.
Wow. We fall into this tragic trap where we spend the entirety of our youth enthusiastically trading our physical and mental health just to accumulate money. And then, without fail, we spend our old age desperately trading all that accumulated money to try and buy back a fraction of our health.
It's the classic trap.
We constantly defer our peace, telling ourselves we will finally relax on some future date that never actually arrives. The truly awakened mind recognizes the trap and simply stops making the trade.
There is, however, one final formidable barrier to cross in this architectural blueprint, and it is frequently the most difficult step.
What's that?
Forgiveness. More specifically, the profound challenge of self-forgiveness.
Oh, the sources address this beautifully. They talk about that sudden memory of a harsh word you spoke years ago, or a moment of deep selfishness from your past that suddenly flashes in your mind.
It hits you out of nowhere.
Right. You can successfully hide your mistakes from the rest of the world, but your softened heart ensures you can no longer hide them from yourself.
When you wake up in the middle of the night with a heavy heart, agonizing over a past failure or a moment you lacked empathy, the ego tries to frame that as a punishment.
Like you're torturing yourself.
Exactly. But the framework teaches us that this guilt is actually the ultimate proof that your conscience is alive and functioning.
Oh, that's a relief.
It really is. It means the thaw was successful. Your armor is gone, and your heart has finally softened enough to genuinely feel the weight of your own actions. The goal of an awakened life is not the impossible task of possessing a flawless past.
Nobody asked that.
Right. The goal is having the courage to look those past mistakes directly in the eye today, and using them to ensure that today, you are a demonstrably gentler person than you were yesterday.
The highest form of spiritual guidance doesn't care how famous you are. It doesn't care about the bullet points on your resume or the square footage of your house. It only cares that after all the bruising, the fracturing, and the harsh lessons the world has inevitably given you, you still make the conscious choice to be kind.
It is the quietest yet most significant victory a human being can achieve.
It really is. So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final, lingering thought to mull over, drawn directly from the core of the text we explored today. The true light of a human being is not found by somehow managing to never get lost in the dark. It is found in the exact moment they stop running, soften their defenses, and consciously decide to turn back toward the quiet.
That's beautifully said.
So the next time we all find ourselves sitting on the couch staring at our glowing screens, mindlessly opening and closing apps to avoid the silence, maybe we can recognize that the strange void we feel isn't asking for another dopamine hit. It isn't asking for more noise. It is asking for a pause. Where in your life can you practice just one sacred delay today?
A truly vital question to carry with us.
Thanks for taking this deep dive with us. We'll catch you next time. you.